How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com. Hey, guess what? It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
Here for another hour of meaty goodness.
Yes, because we were talking about meat before the show.
Yes, yes, we were.
As you do sometimes.
But, you know, every time we end a show and it's like solid awesome, which is most of them, Richard always says, well, that was an hour of meaty goodness.
Well, so, and if we're digging into API, making APIs better, then this is going to be all meaty goodness for sure.
Oh, it's totally going to be all meaty goodness. Anthony Alaribe is here. We're going to talk to him in a few minutes. But first, I have some more goodness from Microsoft for a better Noah framework.
Awesome. All right, man. What do you got?
So I just saw this. It's a blog post from Dan Roth.
Our friend Dan Roth.
Yeah, introducing this experimental tool or feature components called smart components. And these are essentially AI wrapped edit controls. So one of them is a smart paste. So it takes the place of an input text box.
Right.
And by smart paste, you know, if you go to a form and it's got all these fields, name, address, phone number, yada, 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 credit card number, yada. Well, you could copy like text from Notepad or something that has all those details arranged in paragraphs or whatever, copy, and then paste it into the form and poof, everything goes in the right place.
Nice.
Are you interested?
I am.
This is really cool.
No, and you know, this is what I figured all along. As these technologies mature, we're just going to incorporate them. We're not going to make apps about them. We're just going to incorporate them in our apps.
Exactly. And that's what I love about this. It's a great, it's a great application of a high technology to make everyday, ordinary things easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what they also have a text area. So it will do sort of, you put some details of things, you can train it very quickly on just some sentences that are in the style of, and then it will suggest to you like autocomplete, you know, like Gmail does when you're, but with real details. And then there's also a combo box. So when you're pasting components, it will pick the right value from a drop-down combo box if one is there.
Nice.
Little things like that. So this is all good. So we're going to link to it. It's 1891.pwop.me, or you could just search for .NET Smart Components, Daniel Roth. And Steve Sanderson does a great demo. And by the way, he is getting really animated lately in his videos. Like he's turning into like Joe Actor. Like I was really like a used car salesman, but not quite as kitschy, but he's really selling it.
Oh, wow. That's interesting because he's normally so reserved.
He's subdued most of the time.
I think that was Glenn Block, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah, he is a very reserved guy, but he's really excited about this. And it's good.
It's such a good idea. It's very cool.
Fantastic. So 1891.pwop.me. Go check it out. Who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1802. So I went back a bit. That's July of 22. When we were at NDC London, we talked to Victoria Almazova, who we should talk to again because she's so flippin' smart. Yep. That was the whole measuring of DevSecOps, which is a bit of a non sequitur to this comment from Rob Garner, one of our longtime listeners. Hey, Rob, thanks for commenting again, even though admittedly a couple years ago. Because I love what he said here. He says, okay, someone has to say it. It's bound to result in the loss of cool points, but Azure sure seems like it can be hard to use at times.
Sometimes.
I don't think I was supposed to say that, but I'm saying it.
Yeah.
And my example is functions. They're supposed to relieve the developer of the complexity of thinking about the structure of an API to free you to just write code. And the Microsoft examples were great right up until you need to apply the repository pattern. Then you have to use dependency injection. Then you discover you'd be better using the correct dependency approach for version of functions, or whether you're in or out of process. And then you have to dig through all the examples to figure out what you're doing, because the approach has changed several significant ways for each version of Azure function.
And at that point, you should be asking yourself, is a function really what I want here?
Yeah, and
because that's a code smell, right?
Well, and it's the thing that made me jump was like not thinking about the structure of your API, because you should always think about the structure of your API.
Yeah.
I think we're going to talk about that a lot today.
I think so.
But Rob, you said the thing we're not allowed to say out loud. And then part of this is just the twitching of Azure, right? Like Microsoft's still figuring out how to deliver these things to us too, which really makes it tough to write code against it, because you don't know what's going to happen next. And I don't know, if I'm making that API available to more than just me, I need to think a lot about making it right and what that looks like.
Indeed.
So, Rob, thank you so much for your comment. A copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And you can follow us on X, Twitter X, or whatever the hell they're calling it these days. But the cool kids are hanging out on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
And of course, you can find all the ways to get in touch with me at carlfranklin.com. All right, let's introduce Anthony. This is his first time on .NET Rocks, so let me give them the formal introduction. Anthony Alaribe has spent over a decade building software at companies like Opera, Parity, Polkadot, and Delivery Hero. He has faced his fair share of dealing with unreliability and breaking changes in APIs, including losing over $2 million in orders to such API issues at Delivery Hero, which prompted him to build API toolkit.io to help companies navigate their backend and API landscape. He has an academic background in medicine and is currently based in Berlin. When he's not writing code, you can find him binging an anime series or thinking about how principles from the medical world can help us build software better. So from the medical world, so you're saying we should measure software using the metric system?
Maybe. That's a good start.
Well, obviously, the rest of the world does. You guys need to catch up.
Hey, I didn't start the fire, okay? I just live here. I didn't make the freaking rules. In fact, I got an A on my metric test in 6th grade.
No. It's actually a lot of other
Moose
things,
humper. Okay. Enough silliness. So, what did you think of the comment that Richard wrote about functions being brittle?
I think I only read it. I didn't write it.
Did Rob I say wrote?
Yeah.
Oh, you wrote it with your mouth, kind of.
I made noises about it.
It's going to be one of those shows, I think.
It's going to be one of those shows.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think Richard said it nicely, right? We want to use functions as much as possible. Yeah, small, constrained, but then soon you want to access a database or you want to access other dependencies, and it doesn't work out anymore because you need dependencies somehow.
Pretty soon you're just holding on to functions for the purpose of having a function.
Precisely. But I mean, so at the code level, I think when we can, functions can be pretty. Or I think they're my preferred way, to go when I can, just because they're constrained. You know exactly what goes in here. You don't expect so much magic, especially if it's like some kind of pure simple function. It's not gonna reach out to a database without some extra plumbing.
Also, I find that functions are best used when they're used a lot, so they don't go to sleep.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because when a function goes to sleep and the next user comes around and wakes it up, they might think your app is broken.
Yeah.
I wait. What functions are we talking about? I think
Azure functions.
I'm talking about Azure functions. Yeah.
Okay. I was talking about the other functions. I just mixed it up somehow.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's fine.
I love serverless too, so.
Yeah.
We've done a bunch of shows around the whole concept of the modular monolith. And to me, it's like the function is where you put the badly behaved piece of your monolith. That it's the one that's being called all the time, and every time it needs to change, it resonates the whole block of app. Like, so you want to put it in its own wrapper. It's going to always be active, or most of the time active, and you need it to scale independently of everything else. Like, why have to light up more instances of app service when you could just have this noisy thing running in a function?
Exactly. Also, when you want to, when you're already deep in an ecosystem, for example, when you want to, how do I put it? You want to react to events, say,
right?
Like streaming events, do something and do something else and trigger something else, maybe trigger an action. Functions are very good for that because they just get called when that event happens, especially if it's an event that doesn't happen constantly,
Yeah. Hey, can you tell us the Delivery Hero story? Because I love hearing about people losing millions of dollars.
That piqued my interest.
No, I think the Delivery Hero story is not that. I think it's a story most of us have experienced, maybe at different scales.
Right.
What happened was that we were.
Well, wait. What is Delivery Hero? Because I don't know that this is this popular in the United States, right? But elsewhere, this is this Uber Eats kind of thing?
Yeah. So Delivery Hero is this company of companies. That's why the brand is not as popular. But it's a company that owns, I would say, most of the food delivery brands outside of China. So if you think of Glovo or Food Panda, or depending on where you are, Foodora.
But they only deliver Hero sandwiches? Is that the story?
No. Most of the brands that are owned by Delivery Hero, there's an online pizza brand, and I think they only deliver pizza. But then there are other regular Uber Eats style brands. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see this is not North America. This is South America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So what were the API issues that lost $2 million?
That specifically was a migration. So we had to migrate. Well, we were writing a service. So we were writing, just taking out a little bit of a monolith to be a separate service. And this service was the search and discovery experience, where you could search for food from most of these apps and get the list of dishes. And so we implemented this. So my team then, we implemented this service like you would, right? We tried to get the specification of the endpoint that we're migrating, but with legacy services, their documentation might not always be the best. So
that's a very polite way to put it.
So we of course did things the manual way as well, which would be that you copy the request and maybe diff it, use that as the info to implement this new service.
Right. And
when it was time to roll out, we even went a step further, that we ran both of them on staging and diffing. So when a request comes, we would send it to the legacy service and also send it to the new service, and then diff both requests together to make sure that we was doing exactly what was
right. So you're literally just white boxing this. You can't see what the original code is. You're just saying, am I getting the same outputs for the same input on the old one as the new one?
Exactly. So the old code was really it is some, I don't like using the word legacy, but it was one of these services where most of the original authors were no longer in the company.
They're gone. Yeah,
they're gone, and totally
normal.
Exactly. And it was difficult to to get deep into the weeds properly. But even with this care, diffing all the requests, writing as much tests as possible, when we went to production, things still went crazy,
So did you know right away there was a problem, or did it just was losing data or missing things?
So when we went to production, obviously we have the deployment checklist, check that things are still working as expected in as many countries as possible. But we didn't check every country, because at the time we operated in 55 countries. You're not going to test 55 countries.
That's a lot of testing.
Yeah. And So what happened was that in some of these countries, specifically in Scandinavia, they have a legal requirement that food delivery companies have to include the dietary requirements of any dishes that they offer.
Right.
None of us knew about this requirement. Like, I had no idea this was
requirements.
A thing.
What requirements?
So are these nutrition values, like all that kind of stuff?
Exactly.
How many calories,
and,
carbohydrates, fats, whatever,
and also allergies and things like that.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, but this was a requirement only in Scandinavia. The other countries couldn't care less. So everything worked perfectly in the other countries.
Of course.
So you just turned off. So did it fail in Scandinavia, or did it just not provide the data?
Or did you get sued?
No, it didn't get sued. We just the apps just were crashing in Scandinavia, so we couldn't process any orders.
Offline.
Exactly.
So a couple 100,000 people didn't get their lutefisk deliveries.
Yeah. So that's basically what happened, and it seemed like a silly thing, just a couple missing fields. We had pretty good monitoring setup. We tried to do things carefully with this migration, but that did not prevent us from running into this trouble. And it made me start thinking, why can't we automate catching, breaking changes or any kind of issues? So that is basically what happened. Most of us have been there. So
yeah. No, I know the pain. Maybe not that much money, but I know the pain.
Yeah, you have to be very careful.
Do you like? That's the whole point. Like, be more careful next time isn't a good strategy. Like, we should be able to not be careful, and we can't do harm.
What's a good idea is to have a lunch and pass around the errors and omissions insurance policy that your company has, and it tells you what you're on the hook for. And, typically in one of those policies, it'll list right there, failure to prevent denial of service attacks, for example. So if you're publishing an API and you don't have any kind of throttling on that API, you could be sued for one of your downstream customers having a denial of service attack. How about that?
No, I'm just shocked actually that that is in a lot of contracts.
Well, it's in an insurance policy, the kinds of things that it would cover. Yeah.
Well, I mean, first problem with reading insurance policies is staying awake.
Yeah.
The second problem is it will just strike you with fear at all the possible risks.
But that's a good thing to know. Like, what are the things that the insurance companies are concerned about in terms of errors and omissions that you should kind of, think about?
Yeah. Not that litigating is likely to provide a useful outcome.
No, you don't want to avoid that.
Yeah. Winning a lawsuit's like winning an earthquake. Right? Like, there's no good outcomes there.
Yeah.
Right. So the key is to not get sued in the first place.
Yeah. So try and work this out. So was this the story that led you towards API Toolkit?
Yeah, it is precisely this. But all through our careers, we faced a lot of these little issues that kind of stack up in the back of our minds. Before even at Delivery Hero, I used to work basically a digital bank, and with these digital banks, we still have to work with third parties. So the third parties could be other APIs like MasterCard or other banks. In this case, it was in Nigeria, so we had to communicate with other banks and the National Interbank Settlement System. And it was very common that these third parties would either just go down or they would just introduce breaking changes. It could be something as simple as renaming a field. Maybe someone named the field messages before, and then some new engineer says, why is this messages? It's always one message.
Right.
And then changes it to message.
Yeah.
Harmless from his perspective, but no one was prepared for that.
I worked on a project once where the architect had every field be an array instead of just a single value, in the event that someday down the road, perhaps
maybe
you might want to pass two of those values instead of one. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
To be fair, we don't know the trauma that Dev experienced before that made him do that.
Well, yeah,
that's.
But there's preparing for trauma, and then there's just common sense, being agile, right? All right. So we haven't really talked about what API Toolkit IO is. If you go to API Toolkit IO, it says AI powered API observability, quality assurance, and insights. So give us the elevator pitch there.
Yeah, that's a lot of words. But the whole idea is, we already have a lot. We have our monitoring platforms already, but can't we go a step lower? Most monitoring platforms would catch several issues, maybe some logs and any errors you put in your logs, maybe. But could we go a step further and actually analyze the payloads? The requests body and response body that your customers are making to you, but also that you are making to third-party integrations and APIs. And the reason is that not every error is going to be an error in your log or an exception that you can catch. Some errors could just be, missing data, something was renamed, or an error that is coming from a dependency. I can give a story about this dependency because there's something that happened. A customer had to deal with a library, a simple dates library, and this dates library was created by an American, sorry. But the default...
that was me. I'm sorry.
But it defaulted to, the US date format, which is, I think it's month, day, and then year. Yeah. And there was this very long conversation on this library's GitHub that, hey, we should use the international default of, day, month, year. And it went on for, maybe even a couple of years. Then the author gave in and said, okay, let's make this change. And there was a 6 months deprecation notice. It's just a library, no one is reading the GitHub issues of all the libraries they use.
Sure.
So when this update happened eventually, it caused subtle changes where for some customers, the date field, was now like the international dates type. But that is a hard thing to identify because some days of the year are basically the same on both the US date and the international one, like 1st of January.
11/11. 10/10.
Exactly.
I'm really surprised that out of that meeting didn't come the solution, which is to separate the date into 3 arrays, one with a day, one with a month, and one with a year. No. Because that's clearly the solution.
That might have worked, to be honest. But in any case, it was a breaking change, and it cost this company quite some money. So it was not the kind of change that you would blame a developer. Maybe some developer was working on a completely different task, decided to update some dependencies, and now there's an incident that he has no idea where it came from. So those are the kind of issues I was thinking, can we catch them at the API level?
Wow.
Yeah. ISO 8601 exists for a reason. It's year, month, day. Just at least, however you want to display it after that, knock yourself out, right? Store it as year, month, day.
Right. Yeah. What could happen?
Yeah. It's a classic one. So you feel like you could catch this from at an API level to say, hey, this API is mesh. You got dates now. It's doing something dumb with dates.
Exactly. So what we're doing is, imagine a middleware on your service that every time a request comes into your service, it just takes a copy. So it doesn't really impact your runtime or whatever. It just copies it and then sends it somewhere. And in that somewhere, which is API Toolkit, we're like just learning. We build a model of the API. So we learn what all the fields are, what are all the different permutations of fields that are possible on this API. What are the type? Is this field supposed to be a UUID or is this some random number? And with this model, a lot of things become possible. For example, if this representation changes, if some field used to be a UUID and all of a sudden it's just a number or it's a text,
right,
then someone gets notified and say, hey, this field changed. Was it what you intended? If it was what you intended, then just acknowledge it and move on. But sometimes it's a bug and someone can fix it.
But I like the idea of you just snap this on to the system and let it run for a month. And it should build up a pretty good catalog of all the shape of API calls out there. Like in a month, you're going to figure out if you misunderstood a date field.
Exactly. And it's like it's open to the developers because you can just go and see all your endpoints, pick one of the endpoints and see all the different shapes. At the end of the day, most endpoints don't have quite so many shapes. Maybe there's a lot of different HTTP status codes and then different responses.
I'm sure 80% of them are fine. They're all the same. And maybe it's even 95% of the fine. It's all the edges that matter. Sometimes you've got Scandinavians.
And the damn requirements.
Right. So the idea that just to highlight that, hey, there's an additional chunk of data and anything going to these endpoints would have been enough flag for you to at least look to know, oh, there's something weird there. We should go look there.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
So we basically did that, and along the way we realized, we are analyzing and building this model. There's much more we can do, for example. So we now started to think, okay, what more can we do? For example, we can generate open API specifications from this model that we have now. And the next step is we can generate simplistic kind of API tests, because you understand a user's journey on the back end.
Yeah, sure.
You can say, okay, user logs in, then it hits this endpoint and hits this endpoint. You can just generate some tests that can now be automated and say, okay, make this make this synthetic monitor call every 1 hour, just behave like a user and check that everything is as it should be. That's basically it. So it's the thing I wish we had at Delivery Hero.
Yeah, absolutely. If it had existed, you probably would have got that. I guess the question is the overhead. Like, can I feel it when this thing's turned on? Does the number of requests per second go down? Just because this is going to cost me something.
It will cost you something, and that something depends on the technology stack. So if you're using a stack like PHP, the challenge with PHP is that it's single process. Every request is processed in a single process.
Right.
So we can't just do something behind the scenes. Although we try and use a lot of different techniques.
But if you're using PHP, you're used to pain anyway, right?
Fair point. Fair point. But for the other technology stacks, you would notice it's like copying a request happens in nanoseconds, microseconds max. The sending of the data is like if you have any login or any telemetry, it's basically the same. It's just asynchronous. Maybe you spend a little bit more memory.
I mean, I just like this from an observability perspective to say, okay, well, what do you see about what my APIs are up to? Like we've talked in the past about Azure API management, but that's mostly about, something that Carl mentioned earlier on, which was
throttling.
Can you deal with throttling when a runaway process is calling it 50 times a second?
Certainly the most popular feature.
So that you can at least say that one bad actor can't knock everybody else down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
You guys are doing content analysis, which I think is a much trickier problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're not an active proxy, unfortunately, so we can't throttle anyone.
No.
With API toolkit.
That's a different thing. Use API management for that.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, guys, hold that thought for just a minute while we take a moment for these very important messages. We'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's my friend Richard Campbell.
Hey.
And that's my new friend Anthony Alaribe. And he's talking about APIs and observability and the AI part of this, which is really content analysis, as he was just talking about. I'm really interested in how you use your medical training to write better software?
That's an interesting question. Something that I have been thinking about that I think we could learn from the medical world is SOPs, or I guess we like to call them run books in our industry.
Right.
But in medicine, there is an SOP. An SOP is a standard operating procedure.
Right.
So there's a standard operating procedure for pretty much everything. If your doctor is gonna tear open your heart, he's not gonna be like, "Oh, I'm feeling creative today."
Yeah, let's just go for it.
No, I have a new idea.
Yeah.
Hold my beer.
Right? Maybe I just open it from down this time, but no.
Yeah, right. Let's go through the belly button for a heart transplant. What could happen?
What could go wrong?
Yeah. So, but it doesn't mean there is no creativity happening in the medical world. There still is, but there's creativity happens with constraints. When all the common problems are solved, then you can you can get creative on small things at a time. And I feel like in software, we are always reinventing the same things over and over and over. Right. There's a lot of blog posts. Like if I want to create an app today, it might be different from how I created an app last month.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I do think we have that problem in software where no two projects are ever the same. One could be excused by, hey, the stacks are advancing, but the other is that we are prone to wanting to play with the new toys. Mm-hmm. So, the opportunity to go, oh, I want to play with this stack now, which not many, that's kind of service to us rather than service to the customer. Rather than go with a stack I already knew, is well instrumented, has the pipeline set up for. I just resist. It's okay to work within the same stack. There's innovations that can happen inside there.
Well said.
I think that is basically it. That we are, as engineers, we want to experiment, want to try new things. But if we can just agree on some standard, base layers, it could move that innovation a step further.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of everyone creating one more N+1 framework that is, almost the same as the other, we can start, innovating at, some of the things that are actually different, like our business logics or the problems we really want to solve, or performance. Maybe apps can finally be faster and we can all innovate on how to make things faster, etc. But it's something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah,
more.
For sure.
Have you seen more? Maybe a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like in your experience, how much have you seen run books being used in internal organizations?
I mean, more. And there's, and when I hear run books, I think Chef, right? Because they were really the ones who popularized that name as a set of CI/CD pipelines. There's a bunch of different approaches, but it's automation. It's about don't open a Word document, right? It's code. Today we look at GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, like in the .NET world, where often just checking the code in, accepting the PR kicks off the process that begins all those integration steps. The run book is activated. And I definitely see more and more developers who's like, I don't want to think about this. I want to get as far as it worked on my machine. It passed my unit tests. I push it up as a PR. We go through the review process. And the rest isn't my responsibility. The whole team took care of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a natural cycle that devs go through, or dev teams, where something new comes out and it promises to, be a little more complex up front, but then it will save you time down the road, right? And this happens over and over again and most devs resist that because they don't want to go through the initial pain of learning something new and moving their cheese and, changing their routine. But then, then they see somebody else just like going at 1,000 miles an hour and things are just happening, like the first time we interviewed Mark Rendell, Richard, and he told us all about like all these crazy processes that he had in automation that he was doing. And it was all manual and stuff. And my first thought was, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. But then I thought about, wow, from thought to implementation to publishing can just be instantaneous. And how powerful is that?
Right.
And then, after a while, these devs adopt these things, but it takes a while. I have customers that are still, living without source control.
Oh, man.
Can you believe that?
FTP it in.
And I have to educate them on how to use GitHub before we can even start working.
Yep.
I found that interesting. Just like you said, I've seen that runbooks are most popular in CI/CD, or in deployment. Let's have a runbook for how to roll out the new service, and because we have those runbooks, a lot of evolution happened, like Ansible and Optio, having Docker, for example. Just the benefit we have in our industry is that if things are done over and over, it might be possible to just, box it up into Docker or into some library or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it can be runbooks, or the idea of runbooks could be applied even further to more things, and I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know the how, but assuming we had more, maybe industry-wide agreed upon runbooks for a lot of things, like maybe how do I build XYZ, or how do I, you can onboard even the more junior developers, and you can trust them to do quite a lot of tasks without being afraid, because they're really just following a runbook. And then allow the creativity to just happen, maybe in creating new runbooks, for example.
Are we dancing around the main thing here, which is part of that pipeline is testing, right? In automated testing, so that the junior can't write a piece of code that's going to cause a problem because the test is going to kick it back. You're not, I think too many people think about the pipeline as just deploy this for me. Don't think. Right? It's really just the continuous deployment part. And the only part of a continuous integration that's in there is compile it, which really real integration is this code suitable to be integrated?
Yeah, I very much agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think the tool you're building here is about, I have collected data for how this API has behaved in the past, so I can generate the set of tests for you that become part of the pipeline. So if your new code doesn't comply with which we know is the current way that the API behaves, it's not getting integrated.
Yeah, exactly. It is exactly that, that we can catch. And if you consider how, as developers, we always know the ideal, we know what we should be doing, we know we should all be writing tests. But every time I speak with a developer, I ask them, how confident, are you in all the tests you've written? Do you feel like the software you maintain right now is perfectly tested? And everyone always feels like,
anybody who says yes is lying, right? Like that's the old "Are you a good man?" Anybody says yes to that, you question it. It's like the correct answer is "I'm not sure." Like arguably, it's not up to you, right? Are you perfectly tested? Almost certainly not. Am I sufficiently tested? Perhaps. Like there's no absolutes here.
Just for just for as much info as I have, or at least I'm tested enough for the last incidents that we experienced.
Yeah. I'm not likely to fail on the thing that knocked the system down last week. I'm not even saying I'm certain about that. I'm not likely to fail on that.
I was a betting man.
Yeah. I took it on the head for that one already, and I think I've written the test that would catch that before it gets deployed. Now, let's go to the next one.
Let's see what happens.
Again, I think the most important thing here is this idea that an extended period of monitoring of observability with this tool builds a test suite for you. Because who likes writing tests? And here's the joke: like I write those tests, then we rev the API, so the tests are wrong, and we got to go again, right? So the idea that you could regenerate them after that is pretty compelling to me. Like that's a bunch of work nobody really wants to do in the first place.
Yeah, actually, this idea, half of it came from something we did at Delivery Hero, which is we used to have this load tests that we would write, with K6, write some generic tests to throw, I don't know, 1 million requests a minute at the server.
Right.
But they were always wrong because we had very good caching. So pretty much all those tests would just get cached and
They would run great.
handled. Right? Yeah, they would just run great. And we realized we got better results when we actually recorded like the logs of what users are doing,
a production
and then
workload.
replayed it exactly, and then just replayed that.
Well, and that's because humans are weirder than testers. Right? I mean, testers are pretty weird, but humans are weirder still. Like, they do stuff you couldn't even imagine to think of.
Mm-hmm.
Just think of little Bobby Tables.
There you go. No, I remember my favorite one was working on a site that was barely hanging on, like it was overwhelmed by the load. And and part of this problem was that the customers, when the first page wouldn't load, opened another window and tried again, and opened another window, tried again. And so it's like one IP looks like its own DDoS attack, and you could multiply by 10,000 of those people. And you designed your test where each IP made one page request. That is just not what was happening.
Exactly. Users are just
And so this recording the workload and then being able to play, a Saturday afternoon football tournament workload. The bad one. And you would hope that whatever workload you run includes Scandinavian countries. I think that's going to be important.
Hopefully. Maybe that week all of Scandinavia was like, now we're not gonna.
They were on vacation. You missed it.
Yeah.
They need to get their lutefisk on time. Can we talk about pricing here? I'm looking at pricing, and there's a free tier, a plus tier for $20 a month, I think. Yeah. And an enterprise for please call. And so for free, you get 20,000 requests per month, billed monthly, one team member, the last 14 days with data retained. So you can get started checking this out without any pain. Why wouldn't you?
So how do you hook this in? Like, is this code I compile into my app and deploy it, or is this a service? What does this look like?
Exactly. It is a middleware that you just add a line in your code. When we started out, there's been a lot of movement in this eBPF space, and that was originally what I was thinking about. But then I realized that if we want to really help developers, we want to give them as much context as possible.
Sure.
And that context includes things like, when this customer made this request and it failed, these were the exceptions that happened, in the code at that time. Yeah. And when we do things with the eBPF route, we don't have that context of what is in the code. We have just the HTTP.
Yeah, you want to be in that process so you see all those exceptions occur.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's a middleware. You log it, you put it in the code, and it copies the request. If there are exceptions, if there are errors, it attaches the errors that happen to that particular user's log. So you can see, okay, this user with this IP address made this request and got this response, but there was an error with this stack trace and whatever that happened in the meantime.
And you pick, so that line of code is then an invocation to a service you're hosting on their behalf? Or can they run it themselves internally? So that line of code is in their code. It's in your application, and you can. So what it's doing. But what is it calling to? Like, it's there's an open source SDK for most languages, which what the SDK does is basically copy, get all of this information. For some customers, they have sensitive data which they don't want to even leave their servers in the first place. So it's able to redact that sensitive data and then just put the data on, just send it to API toolkit. Or for some enterprise customers, they also just run it on-prem. In that case... So there is an on-prem option if you want to pay for it. Exactly. In that case, it's just a Docker image. You configure it and it just sends it there, basically. No, that's great. And exactly what I was thinking is like, it's in some cases, like I want this data to leave my data center or my Azure instance. So it's contained. And
it had to happen. It had to happen because I built this because I worked in a bank, in a digital bank, and half of the problem came from there.
Yeah.
But digital banks are not going to trust.
Nope, they have. Well, and they're under regulatory requirements. Like they'll lose their license.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
So, what's next for you? What are you working on?
What I'm working on is basically this, just making, especially the things around testing, trying to see what context we can get. And, it's like you have all of this data. Every time you look at it, you're like, oh, I could do this. So it's just, how can we make the life of developers better with the data that we are already getting anyway?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you can help me write tests for my API so I don't break it in the next rev, you're my friend.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
Yeah, and to start with a free tier just to see, does this make sense for me? And it's like, your first hit's free. You'll get addicted.
Yeah. And I think probably the takeaway message from this interview is that this is not an API management replacement. This is content. You're testing content and you're looking for that and using AI for that. So, thanks, Anthony. It's been great. This is a great product.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for spending this hour with us, and we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks.
.NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.